City for Ben Simmons. You ran him out for Ben Simmons and Brett Brown.
We also hate Jimmy Butler here in Minnesota, so same page there.
Look at that. See, I don't hate Jimmy Butler. I miss Jimmy.
I mean, I would love him if he was still on the team.
Well, look, so same thing with James Harden. Yes, Mike. Welcome in. We appreciate you starting the work week with us as we get ready for this 6-game slate on the diamond. It's live before lock MLB edition. We'll tell you all about what's happening on site from the DFS channel to Odd Shopper. So make sure you're subscribed first and foremost, both locations. And if you're here hanging, hit the thumbs up button. If not for me, then for Neil. My goodness, is back in the house. Mike Awesomeo is producing. And yes, we do share a common bond thread, if you will, across the board in the NBA. If it's Jimmy Butler and the fact that there's always a revenge scenario somewhere with Butler, be it Minnesota or Philadelphia, or Neil, the fact that your basketball team is now playing golf and it's probably going to be 4 or 5 games before our basketball, myself and Mike's team, playing golf.
Probably. I hope not. I'm cheering for the Sixers. I would definitely prefer the Sixers over the Heat moving forward. But yeah, pretty tough loss for the Timberwolves. I managed to secure a Timberwolves hat. I've wanted one for a while. I was at the game. We were the pro shop was right outside of our seats, so I managed to finally snag a Timberwolves hat. So at least something good came of that game. Another epic collapse. Just a brutal series for Timberwolves fans. But hey, they won 2. Nobody expected that going in. So I guess we gotta live with the results.
Look, it was a valiant effort, and I know it's a baseball show we're going to get into here, but I did see the change in attire from the XFL hat, the customary Neil Orfield XFL hat, and I saw you switch to the Minnesota Timberwolves cap, so I figured this was your visual eulogy, if you will, of your squad. Like, oh, look at that.
Timberwolves jersey, Petty. Travis Petty's asked me if it's the DraftKings jersey. Yeah, I didn't know that DraftKings had jerseys, so sadly don't have one.
Yeah, look at that. That's amazing. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Larry asking why I'm dressed down today. No formal. That was TV on Friday. All right. I had to sneak upstairs to do a TV show after we did our show. So that's why I didn't even realize people saw the tie. So this is how I normally look. Like Neil, I'm sure. This is how we normally look, right? Throughout the day. You're doing stuff in a baseball jersey. I'm doing stuff in an Awesemo hoodie. I don't think I've taken this off in like 3 days.
The difference is I never dress up. You dress up sometimes for different shows, and
30 minutes
I just do
week.
Awesemo shows.
Right, there you go. 30 minutes a week I'm dressed up, exactly, and people are amazed at it. All right, my friend, we've got 6 games to look at here tonight. Anything that jumps out just in general that maybe it's a theme or maybe it's a game? You've done a lot of looking and researching and diving as far as tonight specifically, and we'll talk about the field, especially where we can find some leverage from stacks and top pitchers. But if there is a theme that has popped out for you at all, then we should definitely look at that first. If there is, if not, then we can keep it moving. But I'm always curious to kind of see how you approach things big picture.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's no really high scoring games on the slate. The highest appears to be Seattle at Houston with an 8.5 total for the game. So no really high scoring games. A lot of decent pitchers, no real aces on the slate. Kind of a wide range of pitchers at different price points that look pretty good. And then a lot of stacks. I'm once again, I feel like I say this every show that we do, but I'm probably going to be pretty spread out once again. There's no spot that I really want to attack. Like there's no like surefire number 1 team. So yeah, I guess my takeaway after looking and reading about the games today, I think I'm going to be pretty spread out once again. It's just a lot of, pretty decent stacks and a lot of pretty decent pitching options, but nobody that's like, wow, the field is totally missing something and I need to go well over the field in any one spot.
I'm sure, though, that being spread out is different on a 5-6 game slate as opposed to a 14 or 13 type game slate.
Yeah, this is isn't it great doing a show on a 6-game slate? The last show we did, we had technical difficulties. We started like 12 minutes late, and then we had to do 13 games, and it was just like I was basically just reading the top stacks tool. This is the only way I could do that slate in that short amount of time. It's nice to be able to have a little bit more time on this one.
Yes.
Yes, spread out definitely looks different on a slate like this than on a 13 gamer. I mean, that one I had, 6% of some teams, and that was like a higher percentage than a lot of others. Whereas this one, you can get 10% of teams and 12% of teams that you feel good about. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different look when you have this few teams on the slate.
I love it, man. All right, so let's jump in and we'll bounce around, start in Miami, Arizona, that short dog on the road here. And you mentioned not a lot of projected scoring tonight. The D-backs have a projected run total of under 3.29, and Marlins not that much better. So maybe there's an opportunity here with Zach Gallen, Pablo Lopez on the other side there for Miami to start to look at that. And again, it's let's look at the pitchers first, just because of how low the run projection is for both teams. So you have two guys really that you can attack because they're right there at the top where our projected stacks are, but they're also really heavy owned.
Yeah, I mean, it's both of these pitchers are in great spots for their salaries. So like in a vacuum, they both look like great price per dollar plays. So maybe these are two great cash game pitchers. They are the second and third highest likelihood of being the top two pitchers on the slate. Chris Bassitt has the highest likelihood at 33.1%. Pablo Lopez right behind him at 31.2%, and then Zach Gallen a little drop off at 24.4% chance of being one of the top two pitchers on the slate. But he's also much cheaper at 7,600 than the other two. So they are great plays in a vacuum, and you can play these guys and feel confident in them. However, they are, as you said, overowned just based on the top pitchers tool. Zach Gallen coming in at 39.4% ownership just due to that price per dollar, because he looks so good. Price per dollar, people are going to want to play him. So almost 40% owned with only a 24.4% chance of being a top two pitcher, 24.5% chance of being a top two value pitcher. So even factoring in that salary. So yes, I'm gonna want to play these guys. I'm gonna come in under the field, but I think I'm probably gonna cap pitchers at around 30% today, and my guess is that I'm gonna be at 30% of both of these guys. So I'm actually gonna, rather than the way I usually play, my exploitative style would tell me I want to go under that percentage, that top two pitcher odds for each of these guys. I'm not going to do that with pitchers. I focus more on that with batters than with pitchers. So I'll probably get to 30% of each of these guys. They just, they are both great pitchers, and they are going a little bit over owned, but I'm fine with getting just a little bit under the field and getting more different with bats.
So Larry asked the question, the back end of his point with the question about capping pitchers. And I think that's interesting because of you bringing this up a lot when you're looking at capping a certain amount to where, and this is my takeaway from it, so you tell me how much I'm accurate or not, but you can still cheat and come under a field of a heavier owned pitcher if you're capping it at 8, 9, maybe 10% below, if it's a 39, 40% guy. So it seems like a very workable, smart, intelligent strategy, but I don't want it to be, and this is not a shot at you, Larry C, by any means. I just didn't want it to be reduced to like, oh, you're just capping pitchers across the board to not get to a certain guy. It seems like, especially for higher owned guys, you can kind of, cheat's the wrong word, circumnavigate, maybe the better word.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is different every slate too, but generally I use the top pitchers tool to figure out where I want to set that line, and then whether there are outliers. Sometimes I will take a pitcher, I'll set a line at 30%, and then there's one pitcher that I'll put at 50%, 60%. So I'll spread out a bunch of guys and then go way heavier on another pitcher. Today's slate, I think 30% looks like a reasonable spot to cut off my pitcher percentages. If you did 40%, there's nothing wrong with that. If you did 20%, there's nothing wrong with that. 30% just looks like a reasonable, the top two pitchers have just over a 30% chance of being top two pitchers on the slate. So, and just cutting it off at 30%, I'm still coming under the field on pitchers who are over-owned, and then pushing up some of the guys below them who look a little bit better in terms of their likelihood of success versus ownership. So guys, like Chris Paddock, I'll naturally be pushing up my Chris Paddock ownership by suppressing the ownership of the top guys. So today, that's just, I haven't even made my lineups yet. I've run a crunch just to kind of see where the numbers come out, my stacks and whatnot. But 30% seems like about what I'm going to do. So yeah, to answer Larry's question, I am usually pretty spread out. There are some slates where I will do something a little bit different, but more often than not, yeah, that's correct. I'm pretty spread out, just because more often than not, the pitchers who have the highest likelihood of success are over-owned. So I want to come under on those guys and then come over on some other guys. So, I usually am fairly spread out, just because that's one way to get different than the field. And, it doesn't take a ton of effort. I like to spend a little bit more effort on my bats.
So Gallon is an interesting difference here because it's a spend up option on FanDuel, but the ownership is dropped significantly. So I wonder if that's worth it as a result of how much more leverage you can gain due to the lack of ownership.
Yeah, I mean, he's still worth playing. He is still over owned on FanDuel, coming in at 15.3% ownership
Compared to, yeah,
with a 10.5 chance of being a top pitcher and 5.8% chance of being the top value pitcher. So he's a little bit over owned on FanDuel. Again, it's a situation where maybe today I'll set my cap on pitchers at 10%, probably higher than that, probably closer to 14, 18%. I don't know what I'm going to do exactly. So I might end up over the field on Gallon, just depending on what Fantasy Cruncher gives me. I think that he's in a good enough spot. I don't mind being over the field, even though he has slight negative leverage. If that's what Fantasy Cruncher wants to give me, if I can get different with my stacks, I think I'm okay being right around the field on Gallon.
sure. And again, compared to I guess the ownership you're getting at the top at nearly 40% on DK compared to even being third now to Lopez and Bassett. Guys, we'll get to. We mentioned Lopez there. So from the stack standpoint, if you want to look at Arizona first, there's a small little bit of a positive leverage score you can work with. They're going to be one of the cheaper options as well, so that can help you.
Yeah, if the ownership stays where it is, I'm going to have some interest in Arizona. As you said, positive leverage coming in at 3.6% ownership on the stack with a 4.5% chance of being the top stack on the day, and then a 13.8% chance of being the top value stack. People just don't want to target Pablo Lopez. They'd rather not play the stack against Pablo Lopez, and that makes sense. I probably wouldn't go to them in a single entry, but if you're playing 20 or more lineups, I would probably want to get above the field on Arizona, and I'm going to, obviously, in my 150 set, I'm going to try to get above the field. And you don't have to play. I can play 6-7% of Arizona, and I'll still be well above the field. And Pablo Lopez, great pitcher the past couple of years.
Yeah.
But I still think even the best pitchers have off days, and I could see Arizona getting to them. So I'm going to be a little bit above the field, even though I know it's not the likeliest scenario that they are the top stack on the board at 4.5% chance. I still think the odds are just better than their ownership. So that's all that really matters to me. So I'm happy to get to some Arizona stacks.
You're going to have a pretty, I should say, a little bit of a better opportunity to kind of work the field in your favor. It looks like it's going to be more of a cost pay up option for Miami, but looks like there's a little more wiggle room here on a return for that.
Yeah, I actually really like Miami today. Better than Arizona. I
Yeah.
mean, just based on the top stacks, will come in at 5% ownership, but a 6.5% chance of being the top stack, 4.6% chance of being the top value stack. So not as good there, but positive leverage on their top stack odds relative to their ownership. And then also because people are going to be jamming in Zach Gallen, you gain a little bit of leverage by playing Miami. I guess the same argument can be made for Arizona, but Zach Gallen, people are going to be playing a ton of him, which means they're not going to be playing Miami. So you gain leverage on everybody, the 40% of the field that's playing Zach Gallen, by playing Miami stacks. And on top of that, Gallen does have some walk issues. He walked 49 batters last year in 124 innings. So that's not great. And that just increases the likelihood that he's not going to pitch deep into the game. They might, even if they don't have a great game against Gallen, they could knock him out after 4 innings just because his pitch count gets up too high because he's walking too many batters. They're working the counts. So I like the idea of getting to Miami and just getting some leverage on the field and hoping that they can knock Gallen out early. And it's not like Zach Gallen is infallible. They could knock him around early too. So I do actually really like the Marlins today, more so than Arizona. I'm probably going to be getting well above the field there.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think if you're looking at Miami itself, Gallen, you mentioned that's going to be 40% of a two pitcher field that you could clearly knock out if that's the case. And Miami puts up some runs. So we'll move on to our next game. But I do have to ask, because I see this here, and blame Terry for the derailment, Neil. But look at Fancy Neil with the trimmed up beard for the show this week. Where's Waterface with the comments now? And then Awesomeo Mike here, who's producing, says, Linda, as they say on the south side of Chicago, she gone. So I'm sorry. I have to find out what the hell's going on here because my interest is piqued.
So I think that there is a woman named Linda who comments on Terry's beard frequently, like maybe because he made a comment on a show last week about it. I think that maybe I don't know the whole backstory of Where's
So you weren't even on the show?
I don't, maybe I was, and I don't always read the comments. So there are shows where I just completely miss the comments, but I believe there is a woman named Linda who comments on Larry's beard, who comments on Terry's beard, maybe when it gets out of hand. So, or maybe she likes it to be, I don't totally understand the context of this, but I know that Terry made some comment about after he had trimmed his beard last week. I don't know what the full context is, but
no, Bean Dude
there's
says it was your beard. See?
Oh, it was my beard. Was it
it
out of
commenting
control?
on Neil's beard. Yeah, during the deep dive last week. This is from Terry now. Before Terry came on live before lock.
What was she saying? Was she insulting me, Terry? Was it too bushy? Because it was getting out of hand last week. Well, I guess that's fine. You know, to each their own. It was a little bit too bushy for me, but I'm lazy. I mean, that's all I can really say. I'm lazy. Today, I finally, after thinking for like the last week and a half, I was like, man, I should really trim my beard. Finally, today, I got around to it. So that's all I can say. I didn't realize that she was attacking me. I thought she was attacking Terry. That's rude. Come on,
well,
Linda.
She's out.
None of that.
Yeah,
exactly. Get out of here, Linda.
Exactly. Yeah, take your beard hate out of here, back to wherever it came from, by all means. And look, there's nothing wrong with being lazy, man. I have to shave my head for 30 minutes a week, and I let my head grow, even though I should shave it every day, 6 days, because I don't have anything else to do. So that's lazy, man. All right. And where are you at on that, Linda? All right, you want to
come on, Linda?
Shot at that, Linda? Go ahead. All right.
Bindu says she didn't go for my gruff or leverage talks, so just didn't like the show all around. But Terry liked it. Terry says he liked it. He liked bushy beard lumberjack Neil. So thank you, Terry.
Yeah, we all got your back on that, Neil. As bushy as you want, you can grow the James Harden beard for all we care, and we'll love you still.
Thank
all right.
Appreciate that.
All right, your boys in town in Baltimore. So let's look at this matchup here. Twins, we've got to find something positive in Minnesota right now, right? So maybe it's Chris Paddock tonight, Tyler Wells on the other side. Let's start with the pitching matchup and then kind of move to the stack. So mentioned that we've got Wells really with Baltimore. Why don't we start with your guy here in Paddock, 7,200 on DK, clearly workable as it's a little bit of an under-owned situation.
Yeah, I have some interest in Chris Paddock. He, as you said, he's coming in a little bit under owned, 19.1% ownership, 20.3% top two pitcher odds, 24.4% top two value odds. And then I was listening to Terry on the show earlier. I actually didn't get through the whole thing, but I got through at least the twin section. And he was mentioning that Chris Paddock has increased his curveball rate up to 21%. So, getting into Terry's, finger on the pulse of the baseball players, I thought that was kind of interesting, hearing that he's actually increased his curveball rate. Terry suggested that it could potentially increase his strikeout rate as well. So if there's a spot where the field is not quite catching on to something yet, I would like to take advantage of that. So add in the simulations like him, and then on top of that, maybe there's a little bit of narrative to like. He's going up against Baltimore in Camden Yards, where now it's harder to hit it out of the park. A lot of reason to like Chris Paddock at 7,200 here. So I think I'm going to be, I said I'm going to limit my pitchers to a 30% cap. He is a spot where I might actually increase his projection to make sure he gets to that 30% mark if he doesn't get there naturally.
How much does it change for you on FanDuel? It's a little bit wider of a leverage gap, but we don't really have a guy that is far and away with Bassett, who we'll get to, a main top pitcher that's projected. So Paddock may actually be similar or maybe even a better leverage play overall on FanDuel.
Yeah, I think I actually might like him even better on FanDuel. Yeah. He's a little bit more expensive, but I think the salary cap might be higher.
Narrow, right?
I think the salary cap might also be higher too. But yeah, the gap is so narrow. I mean, 15% for Bassett at the top, and then Chris Paddock at 9.8% chance of being a top two pitcher, much cheaper. And he's only coming in at 6.9% ownership.
It's almost $600 more, Neil, on FanDuel than it is on DK. So it's not a huge pay up.
Yeah, exactly right. So yeah, I'm definitely happy to get to Chris Paddock just based on the top pitcher tool, and the same reasoning that applies for DraftKings, that he might be a better pitcher than he was last year. So maybe the Twins have fixed him. We can hope, and it's a great matchup. So a lot of reasons to like Chris Paddock here. I'm going to be above the field on both sides for sure.
Are you using Wells as your top pay down option? He's coming up as a pretty good opportunity here on DK to do that.
Yeah, I know, and I don't love that. So he's pretty limited. I think they have said that they're going to limit him to still around like 72 pitches or something like that. I think Baltimore has come out and said that. So if he's limited to 72 pitchers, he might not even get enough innings to potentially get a win. I think the one thing that you really do like about Wells is that he is 5,100. So he is the cheapest pitcher on the board on DraftKings, I believe. I should flip back to DraftKings, but I'm fairly sure that that's the case. There's nobody viable that's cheaper. Hang on one second. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the cheapest viable pitcher. So the one thing that Wells has going for him is that he allows you to get to stacks that no other pitcher can get to because he's the cheapest. You can get to higher end bats and other stacks that you just won't be able to get to anywhere else. So even if he puts up, 8 fantasy points, that might potentially be enough if it allows you to get to stacks that put up a lot more fantasy points than anybody else can get to with the other pitchers. So that is the reason for playing Wells. He looked phenomenal in the top pitchers duel, coming in at 8.8% ownership, 12% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 35.4% chance of being a top 2 value pitcher. I mean, you don't see numbers like that very often. So just in a vacuum, I look at that in the top pitchers duel and I want to get well above the field on Wells. I'm probably just going to let Fantasy Cruncher do its thing and let it give me what it gives me in terms of Wells. I'm not going to force him, not going to force it to get over the field on Wells just because I don't love that pitch cap. I don't think that it's really that high of a likelihood that he gets there. But the top pitcher stool does love him. So I guess that is the best reason to play Wells is none other than the top pitcher stool loves him. It's not like he's a great pitcher. It's not like it's a great spot for him. I guess he's in Camden, so that helps a little bit. But in general, he's not somebody I'm going to be forcing into too many lineups.
All right. So the opposite side of this would be how you're approaching the plate. And if you just look at leverage alone, both of these stacks are right there at the bottom. And unfortunately for you, Neil, it's the Twins who are dead last when it comes to a negative leverage score. Doesn't mean you can't work them in some capacity. You just are starting from way back, nearly 7 points of a negative leverage score, 6.4.
Yeah. I've got him at 4.2. Am I still on
Oh,
FanDuel?
did that update?
I'm on DraftKings. So currently I have them at negative 4.2 and positive if you look at the top value odds. So give me one reason to play the Twins and I will. I'm still going to be getting to probably close to the field on the Twins in my full stacks. They're just so cheap that they allow you to do whatever you want basically with the rest of your lineup. And they're interesting because so far in his career, Wells has been a reverse splits pitcher. So he has done a lot worse against righties than lefties, but it's a pretty small sample size, so you don't really know if he's actually better against righties or lefties. Yeah. And he's limited, as I said, to probably 4 or 5 innings. So I think people might be afraid of playing lefties against Wells or righties against Wells, depending on how much info they have on him. So people might not mix it up as much as they should in this lineup. And I also really like the back of the Twins lineup. They're just so cheap. And if these splits don't hold and he doesn't continue to be a reverse splits pitcher, we got a bunch of lefties for the Twins going in the back half of the lineup. So I have some interest in just playing that back half and hoping that maybe the stats so far are an outlier and he is going to end up doing worse against lefties. And then the back of the Twins stack could really crush it, and probably people aren't going to be there as much. That'll be the lower end portion of the stack. Probably a lot of people are going to go to Buxton. They're going to see the the reverse splits, and Buxton's a righty at the top of the lineup, and he's Byron Buxton, one of the best hitters in baseball. So a lot of reason to love Buxton in a vacuum, but you can get a little bit different just by going to that back half of the Twins lineup. So I think I'll probably be close to the field on the Twins, despite the negative leverage being the on what I'm seeing is the third most negative leverage of any team on this slate. I still think they have slight positive leverage in terms of their top value percentage. So I'm happy to get to at least close to maybe around 15% of the Twins. I think they're a totally fine stack to go to.
Now it's the Orioles, part of me, who are even lower, and they're at 6, just over 6 there. Super cheap, obviously, and that's why a lot of people are getting to them even cheaper than Minnesota. So with that said, how much interest are you having with Baltimore?
Yeah, so as you said, they are the most negative leverage of any team on the slate, coming in at 11.2% ownership, but a 5% chance to be in the top stack. However, they are 23% chance to be in the top value stack, so that does offset the actual top stack odds a little bit. Just points per dollar, they look a little bit better. Yeah, I'd like to go to some of the lefties in the Orioles lineup. Cedric Mullins looks pretty good. Anthony Santander looks pretty good. And just in general, I think that they're a fine team. I'll probably have close to the field, to be honest, probably around 10% Baltimore stacks, just because they're such a good value stack. They have the top odds of being the top value stack on the slate, and that's you like to see that. You can get to some other power bats with the rest of your spots and get to higher end pitching by going to Baltimore. So I think that's why they're getting such high ownership, and it is a reason to play them. Probably not the first stack that I go to if I'm just making one lineup, but I think if I make 5-10 lineups, I'll probably have at least one Baltimore stack.
All right. And it makes sense, especially when you see that super negative leverage score and there's a way to work around it. That's why we want to focus on everything, even there at the bottom for two teams. Well, Baltimore, at least in that 3.5 projected run total. Toronto, New York, a little different story here. Both teams at that 4.3 projected run total. We have Stripling and Montgomery, though, to look at on the mound. And if you want to just start there with this Yankees, Toronto, really like both guys coming in from an ownership standpoint at the bottom. DK, it's a little different. Unlike FanDuel, you're going to have a much wider gap between top two projected pitchers, guys that we've already talked about in Gallen and Lopez, mentioned Bassett. So you have a bunch of guys that are higher up when it comes to top two pitchers. But if you were just countering the field here, there is an opportunity for leverage with both Montgomery and Stripling.
Yeah, there is, and Stripling is so cheap. He is the second cheapest pitcher on the board, so he gives you a little bit better odds of getting there just because he allows you to get to other spots. And he threw 7 strikeouts against Boston last week, and that's a pretty good lineup too. So even though he's playing the Yankees, he maybe showed a little bit of upside last week, and who knows, maybe there's something real there. Maybe he's changed something in his pitching mechanics and can improve his strikeout rate, but it's pretty unlikely. I mean, he's not a pitcher that I have a ton of confidence in that I'm going to really target that much, but he looks incredible in the top pitching tool, coming in at 2% ownership with a 9.3% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 22.6% chance of being a top 2 value. He is a pitcher that I'm going to want to have some exposure to. So even if I have 20 lineups, I would want to have a couple Ross Stripling at least. And in 150, I'll definitely be above the field at 2%. I'm probably not going to get up to 20% Ross Stripling, but if I'm not getting any, I'm going to boost his projection a little bit just because I think at 5,800, he's got at least some upside there. And he could break the slate potentially just because he's cheap enough that he doesn't need to match the top pitchers on the slate. So I do have interest there. But probably not going to go overboard. I'm not going to be playing 20-30%. And then the other side, Jordan Montgomery. Yeah, he looks okay. So he's 8,100, a lot more expensive than Stripling, a lot more competition around that price range, coming in at 2.3% ownership as a result. He is a top 2 pitcher, 8.3% of the time, top 2 values, 6.2% of the time. And he's also going up against Toronto. So 8,100 going up against Toronto, not an incredible pitcher. So I don't really see a need to force in Jordan Montgomery.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's worth it on FanDuel, especially because while he's underweight, right, when it comes to the ownership versus where he is, we talked about Paddock being there at a 9.8 versus Bassett at 15 on our top. But that gap seems too wide. Even though you're getting a price reduction for Montgomery on FanDuel, that 10-point gap just seems like a mile going into tonight. The difference between a guy like Bassett and Montgomery doesn't even it's worth getting to a ton there.
Yeah, exactly right. I'd just rather go to Bassett in that case. They're close enough in price, and Bassett just looks so much better. So yeah, give me Bassett over Montgomery all day.
All right, so let's look at the other side of it here. And if we're just on DK trying to take advantage of any type of positive leverage with this, both stacks, really, Toronto and the Yankees. Yankees are going to be more popular by all means. Toronto, though, not terrible as far as that just flat to negative, barely, if you will, leverage there. Both teams, though, are going to be somewhat pay up options on the slate. So maybe there's a way to kind of work that in your favor, knowing that even the Yankees and their score is not enough that I think would be a huge deterrent or even anywhere near the Minnesota Baltimore level.
Yeah, I'm plenty happy to play both the Yankees and Toronto. They both have negative leverage in the top stacks tool, so I'm probably not going to be reaching the field on either of them. I'll probably be a little bit under the field, but they both look just fine. The Yankees coming in at 14.3% ownership on the stack with a 13.2% chance to be in the top stack. It's worth noting that Ross Stripling has been also a reverse splits pitcher, so you can play some of the Yankees righties against him, and obviously you can always mix in lefties against a righty too. But the righties for the Yankees look pretty good against Ross Stripling. Maybe some people won't know that he's a reverse splits pitcher, and you can get a little bit lower ownership on Judge and Stanton. Probably not. That's probably not the case, but you can always go to Judge and Stanton, and when you're playing against a pitcher like Stripling, who is a reverse splits pitcher, that's a great spot for the Yankees. I'm probably going to be a little bit under the field, but if you wanted to play them, you could play the Yankees in a single entry. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They're probably not the first place I'd go, but they're probably not the last either. They'd probably be one of the first. If I have 5 lineups, I'd probably have a Yankees lineup. Toronto has a little bit worse odds of being the top stack, but they're also coming in at lower ownership. So 8.6% ownership on the stack, 8.4% chance of being the top stack. But they're the Blue Jays. They're always dangerous. You can always play the Blue Jays, and it's not like you're afraid of Jordan Montgomery. So not the first place I'd go, but I think there's always obviously nothing wrong with going to the Blue Jays if that's a place you want to go. They have plenty of power, plenty of great hitters, and they could knock Montgomery out early.
Yeah, are you a little surprised that they're not so in the sense of, but maybe that under-owned overall, just because they're also not. You're definitely paying up more than you are Minnesota, Seattle, right, Tampa even, but they're not super expensive, even like in Atlanta. So I don't know. It seemed like they would catch a little more ownership. Same on FanDuel. So I don't know. It's just interesting, and I don't know if you saw it the same way.
Yeah, I mean it is a little bit surprising that they're coming in at under 10% ownership, but
Right.
there's just so many other cheaper stacks. I think what it comes down to is there are other stacks that just look better. I mean, you look at all the stacks that are getting higher ownership than the Blue Jays. Houston looks like a really solid spot. The Twins, we've talked about. The Yankees, we've talked about. Baltimore looks okay. There's just a lot of stacks that look pretty good. So I guess it's just you suppress the ownership of every team because all the teams look pretty good, and then they're not one of the cheapest teams on the board, so you just don't naturally go there. It looks like they're about neutral, so the ownership is coming in about right where it should for Toronto, and that's probably around where I'm going to be too.
Okay, makes sense. So both sides there, really, as far as
Toronto, I mean both sides are, in my opinion, fairly neutral plays, and just based on the top stack. So they're both coming in about where they should in terms of ownership. They're both a little bit negative leverage currently, but that could, and it could just the ownership could come in a little bit lower than we're expecting, or a little bit higher than we're expecting. And what happened?
No, you froze just a sec, but we got you.
Okay.
No. So I just wanted to make sure that you repeated that last part.
Just that I'm probably going to be right around the field just because they are both fairly neutral plays according to the top stack tool, and I think that makes sense to me. They look like fairly neutral plays, so I'm happy to play right around the field.
Awesome, brother. All right, so we move on now and hit that halfway mark. So the final stretch here, and just kind of looking at the Mets game, Houston, also in Oakland as well. Reminders, we constantly are telling you not only to subscribe here, but the Odd Shopper channel as well. You're going to get up to the second from Alex's projections on Awesemo. They're free on Odd Shopper, which is also free. And it's a great place to go, especially tonight with the NBA. Player props have been tight. So it's free. Just go there and search through. It's a really easy way, right, to just make some money. So it's a nice component. You want to smash a GPP tonight based off of Neil's advice on the diamond, go out there and sprinkle a little bit on Devin Booker over 2.5 threes and have some fun with Odd Shopper. That's all. That's the beauty of it, man. All right.
Sure.
And let's go. All right. So Atlanta, Mets Braves, pardon me here. And if we're looking at this from a pitching matchup first, really, we talked about Bassett being right there at the top. Let's start there, I think, from just an ownership standpoint. Gallen is the other guy. Lopez as well, just a little bit low. But those are the 3 guys that are catching the majority as far as P1s, if you will, tonight. So where does Bassett fit overall for you, and also in the backdrop of the other two guys that we talked about, in Gallon, the cheaper option, and Lopez, who's actually a little bit more expensive?
Yeah, so Chris Bassett is coming in with the highest likelihood of being one of the top two pitchers on the slate. And really, the leverage is not that negative on Bassett. So we've seen a lot of pitchers that, they come in with a little bit better odds of being the top two pitcher on the slate, and then they end up coming in at 60% ownership. We've seen a lot of those spots. Bassett looks like he's only a little bit overowned, coming in at 38% ownership, but a 33.1% chance of being a top two pitcher, 16.3% chance of being a top two value. But again, that's because he's so expensive. It's just unlikely that you're going to be the top value on the slate when you are that expensive. So not as concerned with the top two value with the more expensive pitchers. So yeah, as I said, I'll probably set my pitching cap at 30%. I don't think I'm going to make an exception for a little bit overowned in the tools, but I'm perfectly happy getting too close to the field on Bassett. And I think it's a totally fine spot for him. And then Fried, again, he's a little bit overowned. He's just 300 under less expensive than Bassett, but he's all the way down at Bassett being 33.1% chance of being a top two pitcher. Fried is 17.7. So a big drop off there. You also see it reflected in the ownership, coming in at 21.1% ownership. So he's just a little bit overowned. I might naturally get to a little bit more of Fried actually, because I'm suppressing my ownership on Bassett, Lopez, Gallon, the guys who are getting above 30%. It might naturally force up some of the guys who project a little bit worse, but still have decent odds of being a top two pitcher.
Okay. And it makes sense too, trying to work that field there. So we can move on to the other side, unless you were to look at anything on FanDuel that maybe was a little more appealing here. I mean, Bassett's going to be the top pitcher we talked about on FanDuel, and I don't know if now the difference in ownership versus top pitcher is going to be more of a deterrent for you here.
Yeah, so it is a bigger deterrent for me on FanDuel because he's 27.2% ownership, but 15% top pitcher odds. So that's a bigger gap there. So I would want to get more under the field on FanDuel than on DraftKings on Bassett. And then Fried, again, looks like he has slight negative leverage on FanDuel, but, close enough. 12.2% ownership, 9.6% chance of being a top pitcher. So I'm perfectly fine playing Fried if that's what Fantasy Cruncher gives me. I'm not going to I'm not going to force myself to be well under the field on Fried. There's a good chance I'll end up coming in over the field just based on where I set my line for pitchers.
Okay, so the bats here don't have too high of a projection to finish. When you look at the Mets, at least on one end, just Oakland below them as far as the top stack projected, at least. And then the other side of it is Atlanta, who's kind of just at either the bottom of the middle tier or the top of the bottom tier, however you want to classify it to your advantage. But you're getting a shit ton of leverage with both teams. Let's be honest.
Yep, and that's what I care about most. So these are,
Yep.
It's a tough matchup for both of them. Both teams have low implied team totals, both coming in at 3.3 runs. So not expected to score a lot of runs in this game, but really, this is baseball. Anything can happen. It's not like these are true aces. So I'm totally fine just using the top stacks tool and getting above the field on both players. Atlanta coming in at 2.2% ownership on the stack, but a 6.2% chance of being in the top stack. That is massive leverage. They're the second highest positive leverage team on the slate. Because the odds are still relatively low, despite the positive leverage, they're probably not the first team I'd go to in a single entry. But if I had, 5 lineups, I'd probably want one Atlanta lineup. At least if I had 10, I would certainly want at least one Atlanta lineup. I'd like to be above the field on the Braves, just because they are the highest or the second highest leverage spot on the slate. And then the Mets coming in at 1.9% ownership, but a 4.4% chance of being the top stack. Same boat. They're not the highest likelihood of being the top stack on the slate. Not the first place I'd go, but if I have 10 lineups, I might want one Mets lineup in there, just because nobody's playing them and they've got better odds than the ownership would suggest. And people are afraid of Bassett. They're afraid of Fried. And those guys are going so high owned, particularly Bassett, that you can gain a little bit of leverage by playing the Brave stack. So these are both spots where, yeah, I want to go above the field, gain a little bit of leverage on chalk pitchers. Don't go overboard because they're not the highest likelihood of putting up a ton of runs. But I think going over the field is a smart move for both of these teams.
By the way, Bean Dude concurs on the chat, playing Atlanta stacks because I love beards and leverage. So there you
Thank you,
have
Bean Dude. Glad somebody appreciates beards.
it. Absolutely, man. Are you kidding me? Who doesn't? That's the thing.
Right.
It's like
Well, Linda doesn't. That's
beards.
who.
Yeah, seriously. I bet you she hates puppies and babies too.
Right. What does Linda know?
Nothing. We have deduced that. If there's one thing we know heading into tonight, it may not be the top stack or top pitcher on FanDuel, but it's definitely Linda hates beards, puppies, ice cream,
Yeah.
babies.
Just bad taste all around.
Absolutely, man. All right. Anything left on either of these stacks? I don't know if you wanted to look at FanDuel, if there's any increase. Both of the leverage is insane on DraftKings. So pretty much knocked that one out. Same thing with FanDuel as well. If it's the Mets or Atlanta, that you're both are getting a ridiculous positive leverage score. So I imagine the same thing for either site.
Yep. Yeah. Just looking at FanDuel
Okay.
now, and you're right. They're both, again, two of the most. They're actually the two highest leverage spots on FanDuel. So once again, probably not my first lineup in a single entry, but once you get to 10 lineups, you probably want one share of each of these, just because they have leverage on the chalk pitchers, and because they're just going under-owned relative to their odds of being the top stack.
Yeah. By the way, Larry C. Linda's a clean-shaven, non-leverage woman.
Yeah.
Get that
exactly,
out. And
exactly
I know
right.
I'm clean shaven like in my head, but I'm not here. It's just the wife got on me on the beard. So I picking my fights here in this house this week.
See,
all right, let's move.
My wife,
yes.
my wife likes the beard. She's the one who told me to grow out the beard. So it's a different scenario.
Yours is the length in which it would basically be the longest that my wife is like, that's where she likes it. So it's somewhere between what I have it now and where you have it. But the problem is not that. Neil, the problem is not my wife. The problem is me letting that fucking thing grow for 3 straight weeks. And now I look like I'm either homeless or playing the NBA and James Harden. So it's like, it's craziness, right? Yeah. It's all over the place. That's what the problem is. I ruin it, not her.
Yeah. I mean, I do the same thing. So I get it. It's just not fun to shave. As long as you have a beard, like what's one day difference every day? It's like, what's one more day of growing out a beard? Yep. And then it ends up being scraggly.
And you know what the worst thing is trying to shave this part and avoiding the hair that gets in the top of your lip and then your mouth, and then you're cooked.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate, you got to kind of go with scissors to the mustache part. And I only do that once a week or so. It's not something that I do very often.
See, you just saved. Not only are you making people money tonight, building stacks and top pitchers, but you just saved people like myself who have been struggling through trimming their beard and eating hair for like the next 30 minutes, a lot of time and effort and misery. You just saved us that. So thank you, Neil.
You're welcome. I don't know what I did to save you that time, but I'm glad I did.
Well, yeah, I'm telling you,
trim it. So yeah. Oh yeah.
No, I was never using scissors. I was just using the electric thing that gets all over the place. That's
well, I also, it gets too scraggly, and then like a hair will like go up like this and like start itching my nose, and it drives me crazy. So I just bought some scissors. You got to go in and like, if it starts itching your nose, you got to cut that off. A lot of little tricks there.
Scissors, man. That's a veteran move.
Yeah, see, just tiny scissors. Like there's like specific like small scissors.
That's a leverage move right there, because the majority of the field is using an electric clipper there to get rid of it.
It doesn't work under the nose. It's hard. Yeah.
Full leverage right there. I love it. All right. Seattle at Houston. 2 games to go. We also have to tell you about the Awesemo Hall of Fame in between, because in case you haven't heard, Terry had one major hell of a big over, was it Friday? So we're going to have to brag for one of our own. And even Mr. Buzzard, part of the premium betting Discord, popping in there for a nice 5K hit as well. So we'll brag about our own coming up in a second, but let's look at the Seattle Houston game first. We've got Odorizzi pitching. I feel like every time we do a show, or like every other show, it's a Jake Odorizzi slate, but we've got him on the mound, Marco Gonzalez on the other hand. So if you just want to look at DK, kind of where we have both of these guys, it's going to be at the bottom for both from an ownership standpoint, and really from a top 2 projected pitcher standpoint as well.
Yeah, I mean, Marco Gonzalez, I'm probably not going to be getting to a ton of either of these guys. Marco Gonzalez, he does have positive leverage in the top pitchers tool, coming in at 1% ownership, but a 6.9% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 4% chance of being a top 2 value. I guess that's the reason to play him. There's really no other reason to play him. And Jake Odorizzi, the same thing. He is one of the cheaper pitchers on the board, so he has a good top two value odds relative to his ownership, coming in at 1.9% ownership, 14.6% chance of being a top two value, 6.9% chance of being a top two pitcher. If you get there, I guess it's fine. They do have positive leverage just based on the top pitchers tool. Actually, I want to look and see. Okay, so based on I ran 500 lineups, just setting my cap at 30% exposure to pitchers, I got to 1.6% Jake Odorizzi in 150 lineups. So maybe I'll get to a Jake Odorizzi in 150 set. Probably not going to get to a ton. And then Gonzalez, I did not get a single share in 500 just using the Awesemo projections and setting a cap on my pitchers. So if you want to get more nuanced and just go over the field on guys who are going over owned, more power to you. Maybe there might be some advantage there. I did well enough. I've done well enough just setting a cap and getting more different with my bats. So I don't always feel the need to get into individual pitcher ownerships and forcing in the lower owned guys to get to where I should be based on leverage. But if you want to, more power to you.
Yeah, and I doubt that the significant price drop for Gonzalez changes anything on FanDuel for you.
Yeah, probably not. I haven't run a crunch on FanDuel, but just looking at the top pitchers tool, so he's 7,100. Same kind of deal. Coming in at 1% ownership, 5.6% chance of being a top two pitcher, 8.3% chance of being a top two value. It's possible that I get to some just because I'm going to set my exposures low. If I set it at like 20%, maybe I get to some Marco Gonzalez. But yeah, it's not a spot that I feel the need to force them in for either of them. Jake Odorizzi, I guess he is the second cheapest pitcher on FanDuel, right after Tyler Wells. So I guess there is a reason to get to him, coming in at 1% ownership, 5.1% chance of being a top pitcher, 11.3% chance of being a top value. If you make a full stack lineup, 4-4, 4-3, one off, something like that on FanDuel, and you have 6,200 left over, I think that is perfectly fine to play Jake Odorizzi and just hope that the batters get you there, and Jake Odorizzi just does just enough to help you out. So if you're hand building and you get to Jake Odorizzi, I don't see anything wrong with that. I actually used to do that all the time when I was hand building. I would just build the
Yeah.
stacks first and see which of these pitchers fit with these stacks. So I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to hand build. But in my 150 set, I'm probably not going to get to a ton of either of these guys just because the other guys project better.
All right. So looking at that from an offensive standpoint now, we've got, pardon me, with both teams here from a stack standpoint, Seattle and Houston, can look at where they're projected right there at the top. Seattle may be a better opportunity simply because there's significantly less negative leverage. But just because Houston has that negative, I'm sorry, I'm on FanDuel. Let me get back to try. I don't know why I'm still stuck here on FanDuel, not going back. But similar scenario here. Houston, Seattle right there at the top on DraftKings, but Seattle has a ridiculously positive leverage score despite them being the most expensive of that group at the top. So really, right now, as we have it projected, Neil, Houston, New York Yankees, Seattle, Minnesota, all three double-digit top stack projected on DK. 3 of the 4 have negative leverage scores except for Seattle. So if you're just looking at leverage, Seattle has to be one, if not your favorite play tonight.
Yeah, Seattle might be the first team in my lineup if I'm doing a single entry, just based on they have such positive leverage and high odds of being the top stack odds. So when I see those two things, I think I want to target that. Seattle is definitely a team that I would want to target tonight, coming in at 6.8% ownership, 13.2% chance of being a top stack, 6.4 leverage. That's you just don't see that all that often with a team that grades out this well in terms of their top stack odds. So I definitely have interest in Seattle tonight. And then Houston comes in at some negative leverage, so don't love that. 17.9% ownership, 13.9% top stack odds, 7.6% top value odds. No real reason to try to match the field on Houston when they are going clearly over owned. So probably set my cap around 10%, something like that, and just try to get a little bit under the field on Houston so that I can get to more of teams like Seattle and teams that have some positive leverage. But obviously, they are the top stack on the slate in terms of their top stack odds. So Houston coming in at 13.9% chance to be in the top stack. They are the highest top stack odds on the slate. The only reason to get away is that they have 17.9% ownership, and they are one of the more negative leverage spots on the slate. So that's a reason not to love Houston. If you want to play some Houston bats, Gonzalez has allowed 2 home runs per 9 innings to righties in 2021. So you can get to some Houston bats and hope for some home runs out of the righties. Bregman, Altuve, Gurriel all look great. And then obviously Jordan Alvarez also hits lefty as well. So I think there are plenty of Houston bats you can get to. They just are coming in over-owned as a result. So I'm going to limit my full stacks, but I'll probably play plenty of these guys as one-offs.
Okay, yeah, and that's I think the obvious question too, especially if you're applying it DraftKings, FanDuel for a team like Houston that has that negative leverage score. Seattle is pretty much going to be, even though there's a small negative leverage for Seattle compared to the other teams, just like on DraftKings, you've got a pretty big gap now, a wide gap. So it would make sense if you're getting to Seattle on DK, you're going to be getting to Seattle on FanDuel as well. So last game here, Oakland hosting Tampa. Both teams, Oakland really at the bottom there of the 3, and Tampa on the other side nearly 4. 3-9 for the Rays, 3-1 projected run total for Oakland. We'll get to this game in a second here, but as mentioned, and I know he's here, normally Terry is here just helping out, facilitating the chat, pumping his links to his article, rightfully so. But I think after he cleared 30K, he's just here to make sure that shows do the Hall of Fame segment. I think that's what this is, Neil.
Right. That's good. We got to do the Hall of Fame segment. Give him his flowers.
Because otherwise, there'll be a Slack. Next thing you know, it'll be an email. Then there'll be a call. Like, hey, we want every show to do the Hall of Fame segment so that we can promote everything. So, and rightfully so. Go ahead and brag, Terry and Steve Buzzard, right? So this is what we want you to do out there. If you're new to the Hall of Fame segment, it's very simple. Just download the Awesemo avatar from awesemo.com/avatar. Place in the top 3 of a contest with over 5K contestants. Not hard at all when you're using all of our tools and data here. Tweet your win at Awesemo HOF, and then you'll win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And in the case of Terry, now I don't know about Steve, but in the case of Terry, since he's already here, the winnings that he actually owes, whatever the free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum, he owes that back to Awesemo. So normally, if you're out there non-employee, you get a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. But because Terry hit for 30,000, and look at that, Steve Buzzard at 5K, I think Awesemo was like, all right, well, you owe us the equivalent of a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. That's pretty good for the boys right there, Neil. I know it's not a milli like you're used to, but
yeah, I didn't play on that FanDuel slate. Now I'm kicking myself. I was like, oh, really? All the Awesemos guys did? So I was destined to be at the top with those guys, right? Because if all the Awesemo guys were kicking ass. No, it was fun to see the screenshots. Even though I didn't play, I got to see after the fact. I was like, oh wow, Terry and Steve both in the top 3. That's pretty impressive.
That is, man. If there's ever right there, exactly right, that you see 2 of the guys top 3. Absolutely. But look, it's not just our guys who are part of the Awesemo Hall of Fame. A bunch, by all means, as you see. And we love to see this as far as all of you tweeting everybody. Make sure you're tweeting everybody across the board here. Whatever sport show that you're watching, we love to see it. And again, this is just about what we're doing here, validating, continuing to validate that all of this works. And it's amazing, too, right? It's like F1 or something that's new. We have projections for everything, and you'll see like one of our guys and like 10 other people, right, tweet out and be like, oh, shit, I just started using your F1. I'm sorry, we got to hit that last game, but basically just letting you know that. Oh, and then look at Alex Baker up here. Nice. We have to throw the boss in here.
Nice.
All right, last game, and we'll get out of here. Oakland, Tampa, talked a little bit about the leverage from a stack standpoint in the background. We've got Rasmus and Jeffries, so I don't know what you're doing here on the mound. More so, if you want really looking at DraftKings, maybe there's a better opportunity with Rasmussen, but still not a ton across the board.
Yeah, I mean, Rasmussen looks fine. Actually, I'm on FanDuel. Rasmussen looks
See,
fine on
that's my
FanDuel.
fault.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, Rasmussen looks like a neutral play on DraftKings too. Totally fine spot for him. Obviously, going up against Oakland, you like to target Oakland. Coming in just a little bit over-owned, 23.1% ownership, but 21.2% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 16.3% chance of being a top 2 value. So he's a little bit over-owned, but still, he's facing Oakland. He's a solid pitcher, so I don't hate playing Rasmussen today. And then the other side, Dalton Jeffries looks okay too. Also looks pretty good in the top pitchers tool. Not somebody I'm forcing into my lineups, but if I get there, I'm totally happy with it. Coming in at 6.9% ownership, 8.6% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 14.7% chance of being a top 2 value. Totally fine spot for both of them. If they happen to land in your lineups, I've got no issue with it. They're just not guys that I'm forcing into my lineups. And I don't think I'm getting to a ton. Actually, I am. I'm getting to Drew Rasmussen at my cap of 30%. So looks like I might actually be above the field on Drew Rasmussen. In 500 lineups, I got to a total of 9 Dalton Jeffries.
Wow.
Yeah, so probably he might not make it into my player pool when I whittle down to 150.
All right. So really, this is about Oakland. If you're trying to counter a field that wants nothing to do with Oakland, and then also Tampa, who in that mid-range or maybe bottom of the top range has some workability with some lower ownership.
Yeah, I mean they both look totally fine. Oakland looks great from a top value odds, so they coming in at 2.3% ownership, but a 10.4% chance of being the top value stack on the slate. So that looks really good, and a 2.9% chance of being the top stack. So they have positive leverage both in terms of the top stack odds and the top value odds. They're just a fairly cheap team, and it's not a terribly imposing matchup. So totally fine to go to some Oakland. They actually were the stack that I got to least when I ran 500 crunches or 500 lineups. They were the stack that you just don't get there naturally. They don't project that well. So if you want to get to some Oakland, you're probably gonna have to force them in a little bit, and they look like a solid stack. So I would like to get to some Oakland. But 2.9% chance of being the top stack. It's not like you really want to go totally overboard. And then Tampa, slight negative leverage, 8.9% ownership, 8% chance of being the top stack, 7% chance of being the top value stack. A little bit of negative leverage, but Tampa's always a dangerous team, even in Oakland, where it's not a great hitter's park. They're just a good enough hitting team that I'd like to get to some Tampa. Wouldn't full fade them. Not the first team I'm playing. Kind of a middle of the pack stack for me.
At Player Q DFS for Neil for everything from DFS to grooming tips. So make sure that you're following and thanking him. Again, if it's the scissors or if it's stacking Tampa, whatever it may be, that's Shander Show for me. Thanks to Mike Awesomeo producing. Thanks to you all out there. Always fun in the chat on shows like this. So appreciate that. We only ask you hit the thumbs up button and subscribe across the board. Busy night in the NBA. The deeper dives coming up next. Neil, we'll do it again on what's today? Monday, Friday, right? Wednesday. What am I talking about?
Yeah, Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah.
See you then. Looking forward to it.